Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning in to AMTV Alternative Media Television. Please click the link below, support our sponsor, Provident Metals. That's providentmetals.com. Get all your gold and silver at Provident Metals. So America is collapsing. That's the bottom line. But what people don't really quite understand, and I get asked this question from time to time, it's not when we're going to collapse. We're living through the collapse now. This is what the fall of Rome looks like. This is what a disintegration of the dollar looks like. This is what inflation looks like. It's why the S&P 500 is hitting an all-time high. It's why companies like Google are hitting $1,000 plus a share. It's why Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, raked in over $2 billion. That's $2 billion with the B dollars this year. America is losing itself. And there's a reason for it. Now, most people in America are dependent on the system. Almost 50% of Americans are on some kind of government subsidy, whether or not this is Medicaid or Social Security or food stamps or unemployment. And it's another reason why the groundlings keep electing what a lot of people argue is a socialist president. I would argue is a fascist president. The merger of corporate power with the state, which is exactly what we have now. An aggregation and a concentration of institutions, big banks that go hand in hand with the government. Somebody asked me the other day, said, Christopher, what did the government or who had something to gain by the financial collapse? Well, the finger points straight to the Federal Reserve. It points straight to the money masters. It points straight back to the big banks. Not only were they feeding on the dead carcass of the institutions that were failing during the crash just a few years ago, they received bailouts in addition to that. And from another perspective, think about it even from a real estate perspective. Who's the largest holder of U.S. real estate now? It's the big banks. They took all the properties back in foreclosure. That's what happens when a small business or you go through bankruptcy and have to give your property back to the bank. So they really made profits threefold. Now, of course, they're creating dollars out of thin air. That's how the Federal Reserve System works. It's totally an illusion. They create a fake dollar, and then they loan that dollar 10 times out. They don't have reserves needed to pay all the depositors back if they demanded their money all at once. That is the definition of a Ponzi scheme. There's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of talk around the debt. There's been a ton of it over the past few months as we were eclipsing the almost $17 trillion debt ceiling here in the United States. A war, bickering war, Republicans versus Democrats. Now that they've come to a short-term, not solution, but just a short-term continuation of more than the same, we've put on a record $300 billion plus more debt in just a few short weeks. Part of the reason for that is they had artificially been holding it and suppressing it during the talks and quote-unquote negotiations. But we're realistically looking, based on the projections of a federal debt, a national debt, exceeding well over a $20 trillion by the time we reach February of this coming year. So this is a kick the can down the road strategy with no end in sight. I think Mark Faber said it best. He said, once you start bailouts, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, once you start it, it never ends. And it's never been a question of when quantitative easing is going to end or when the Federal Reserve and now old Yeller Yellen, who's replacing Bernanke, who again is more of the same. It's not a question of when they're going to taper or when they're going to stop the bailouts. They're not going to stop anything. If anything, they're going to get more aggressive. The question is, if they're spending, let's say, $60 billion in that range a month on buying U.S. Treasury debt or mortgage-backed securities, it's not whether or not they're going to taper that back to $30 billion a month. It's whether or not they're going to increase it to $100 billion, to $200 billion, to $500 billion to $1 trillion a month. That is the path that we are on, and it's unsustainable. But here we have the masses, we have the groundlings, we have half of the United States population dependent on the beast that is tearing us apart. And that's the problem. You can't have half of the populace on food stamps, EBT cards, unemployment, Social Security, Medicaid, Obamacare. It doesn't work. We can't pay for it. There's not enough money in reserve. You know, if we treated the federal government like a company, they'd be behind bars. That's how bad it is because they're running a Ponzi scheme. Bernie Madoff said it. He's sitting behind bars. He's told us, and it's the truth. What he did is no different from how the federal government is operating, how the president is operating through his money masters that play him to a tune. You know, the other day, a lady fainted in the background. You probably saw this, and it came in the perfect moment when the president was talking about health care. Nothing's a coincidence. And you see how he went back and he kind of, he straightened the ship. You know, he kind of straightened her out, and it was like, oh, wow, the president's here to help. Nothing's a coincidence, folks. But people think that stuff's conspiracy theory. They think it's a conspiracy theory that the nation's gonna collapse. It's not going to collapse, and I need to emphasize that point. It already has. It's already dead. It's already a dead, rotting carcass. It's dying and has already died from the inside out. That's where America stands today. And it all ends and it all goes the same way. It all moves the same direction. Not only are you ripped off, not only are you turned upside down and your pockets emptied, you're sent to war, and it creates great instability and civil unrest here at home. It's amazing, but you get a lot of angry people when they don't get paid. Now imagine, we had this a couple weeks ago in 17 states, the EBT card system shut down and people couldn't buy food. Imagine when all of these government benefits stop. Imagine when all of our elderly that paid into Social Security can't get their Social Security or can't get their Medicaid, or the countless millions others can't get their unemployment check, etc. That's when we really start to have problems. And that's the direction we're headed. You're not going to get paid. You're not going to get what's yours. And if you're not getting what's yours or what you think is your entitlement, all of a sudden we got a lot of angry people in one spot, holding and wanting to hold somebody accountable. It's the pitchfork mentality. And that's where it's all headed. But again, we are being controlled by not just an elite group of people, but a very manipulative power structure that literally has you and I by the balls. They know what they're doing. They know how they're playing this out. They've already transferred all the wealth. That's what a lot of people don't see. It was all transferred. It's a zero-sum game in 2008. For every seller, there's a buyer. For every buyer, there's a seller. And the person that asked me the question a few days ago, who directly benefits? Who directly benefited from what's happened and who's benefiting now? That's the most important question that you can ask at this given point in history. And it all points to the U.S. Federal Reserve. It all points to the big banks. It all points to the money masters that control, manipulate, and dominate this old world, this old paradigm that is now changing as we break through, as Jim Morrison once said, to the other side. I'm Christopher Green. You've been tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. Please get it out everywhere as usual, hard-hitting in your face. Click the link below and support our sponsor. Peace.